All right, it's my pleasure to welcome back to the program a gentleman who has brought some great media information in his writing. He, of course, is the author of the You Are Looking Live, How the NFL Today Revolutionized Sports Broadcasting, and he's back with another great read. It's Madden and Summerall, How They Revolutionized NFL Broadcasting. Rich Podolsky, thank you very much for being here. Glad to have you.
Nice to be back with you, Jeff.
Yes, sir. So, Madden and Summerall became, the marquee of sports broadcasting, play-by-play in football. I want to start though with the journeys it took for them to get together, and of course, Pat Summerall was a great player in the great Giants teams of the 50s and 60s, and of course, back then, you had to work in the off season because football didn't pay that much, and so he ended up becoming a big deal in radio in New York City, and if you can kind of delve into that for me, that'd be great.
Pat got his first job by accident working for WCBS Radio doing weekend Giants reports when he was in his last year as a player. They wanted Charlie Connolly, who Pat was rooming with. Charlie Connolly was the quarterback of the Giants. He wasn't around when the phone rang. Pat said, well, I'll give him the message to show up for the audition. And right before he hung up, the guy from CBS said to him, well, why don't you come too? You sound okay. And he won the audition over 4 other Giants players. And he enjoyed doing the weekend sports recaps for radio. And one thing led to another. And WCBS Radio in New York asked him to co-host a morning radio show with a guy who had been like a Regis Philbin type, a real entertainer. And the show was interviews and weather and traffic and sports. And Pat thought he was just going to be doing the sports stuff, but he wound up being the host of the entire show because they liked him so much they fired the other guy. And he was getting a cut of any commercial he read on the air. And back in 1962, I think it was, he was making close to $500,000 a year, which today would be, I don't know, 5 or 10 million a year. That was a lot of money in those days, especially when players were making 5,000 a game, 5,000 a season. So that went pretty well for a while. His wife didn't like it because they had to move from Florida to New York. But he enjoyed hanging out and going out at night, digging up interview stuff for the next day. And he picked up a bit of a drinking habit at all these celebrity places. And that went on for close to a year, and then all of a sudden WCBS Radio decided they were going to change their format to all news all the time. And Summerall was out of a job. So he went over to CBS TV and applied for a job of analyst on Giants games. And in those years, it was 62, CBS television was still doing 2 sets of announcers for every game. They would send one set to do announce back to the home team and one set to announce back to the visiting team. So every city thought they were getting, a favorable call from their guys. And Summerall started working with Chris Schenkel, who really showed him the ropes. And Chris Schenkel was one of the great broadcasters, wound up going to Roone Arledge at ABC after that. But Summerall learned how to be a decent analyst. Then, in fact, he was so favorable for the Giants that a couple CBS executives thought he needed to be called on the carpet or fired because he wouldn't criticize anyone. He wouldn't criticize any player, no matter how bad they were, if they were on the Giants. But he moved along. He became great friends with the CBS president, Bill McPhail, they would go out for these Mad Men type drinking lunches at famous restaurants around CBS in those days, and like 21. And Summerall really learned how to hold his liquor. And he became the number one analyst when they just went to one set of announcers for each game. And he was working with Ray Scott. Now, those of you old enough remember Ray Scott was the great Green Bay play-by-play guy. And he was famous for his brevity. And he would say, Boyd to Dowler, touchdown. And that's all you got. And that Summerall learned to be brief from working with Ray Scott. He worked with him for over 6 years. And then when Ray Scott left, Summerall became the number one analyst with Jack Buck, who is Joe Buck's dad. Mm-hmm. And Jack Buck and Summerall were a great team. And then in 1974, CBS had a new president of sports TV, a guy named Bob Wessler. And Wessler called Summerall in one day for lunch and said, you're really good on the air with Jack, but I have one big problem. You guys sound too much alike, and I have to split you up because nobody knows which one of you is talking. Summerall said, oh, my God. Well, if you're going to have to split us up, I'd like to try play-by-play myself. Excuse me, 1 second. And Wessler said, okay, who do you want to work with? And he said, Tom Brookshire, who he had been doing weekend NFL films recaps with. Brookshire used to be a player for the Eagles. And they became great buddies. And they became the number one team with CBS Sports in the late 70s, all the way up to 1980. They did 3 Super Bowls together. The first 2, they got good reviews. The last one, they were just partying way too long, and they didn't do a good job, especially Brookshire. And they got horrible reviews, especially in Sports Illustrated. And that'll take us up to about 1980. John Madden joined CBS Sports in 1979 after he retired at the age of 42 after coaching the Oakland Raiders for 10 years.
And, that's interesting because, there's a whole generation of people who don't know that John Madden was a Super Bowl winning head coach, right? You think about the phases of his career. And of course, and he initially, I guess, did not want to try broadcasting. Is that right?
He didn't have any respect for it. He hated guys like Howard Cosell. He used to call them hairdos. And he thought a lot of the announcers got their facts wrong, that they didn't do their homework. They'd come to town, and in the old days, this is how it went. The 2 announcers, the director and the producer, would meet with the PR guy from each team the day before the game. And the PR guy would tell them who's hurt, who's not playing, and how to pronounce the tough names. And that meeting would be in a bar, and it would last maybe 45 minutes. And then everybody was free to have as much fun as they wanted for the weekend until Sunday, day of the game. And Summerall and Brookshire would go out and get hammered every weekend, and they sometimes would get in trouble and start. Brookshire especially would start bar fights. Summerall was always saying, "We had a great time, so I'm told." But they seemed to hold it together on Sundays, and they were a joy and fun to listen to. And as I wrote in the book, when I was at CBS starting in 1977 as a writer for CBS, and I got to know these guys really well. And I even knew Madden way before he came to CBS when I was covering the Miami Dolphins. Brookshire was the type of guy that everybody loved who worked with him. He was the life of the party, and nobody was ever going to tell him, you've had too many to drink. Mm. And that's the way it was in those days. Everybody just kept the party going, and Brookshire kept everybody in hysterics. But unfortunately, it was not good for either one of them in the long run. So in around Madden comes in 79. He eventually agrees to do 4 games because his agent, Barry Frank, said, you might not want to do it now. Madden said, maybe I want to do it in a few years. And Barry Frank said, you may not want to do it now, but in a few years, they may not want you. There'll be other guys who will be retiring, and they might want them instead. And Madden thought about it and said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And he did 4 games his first year, and he was pretty mediocre. He didn't know how to be an analyst, and nobody really coached him. He had to figure it out on his own. And he was getting into the territory of the play-by-play guy when he was telling all his stories. His stories were going too long, and he had to learn how to cut them down and take cues from the director who was talking in his ear. He hated that. People talking in his ear or saying or telling him what to talk about. And he just kept going. And his stories were interesting, but he certainly wasn't the John Madden we had all gotten to know with the sound effects and the boom and all that stuff years later. He still had to figure it out. His 4th and final game that year was around Thanksgiving weekend. And ironically, it was with Pat Summerall because Brookshire took the weekend off because his daughter was coming out in Philadelphia and he wanted to be there for the event. And they plugged Madden in with Summerall for that game, which only went back to Tampa and Minneapolis. In fact, none of Madden's games went back to New York. And Summerall thought that Madden showed some promise, but I listened to that game on YouTube. And Madden was interesting, but he certainly wasn't fantastic. He wasn't great. And I couldn't even say that he showed a lot of promise. And I considered myself a friend of his at that time because we had hung out together in years before he and I came to CBS. So it came time at the end of the year. CBS was hosting an event. They were hosting the Super Bowl in LA, but the TV people asked them to hold a big luncheon for the television arts and sciences, and 500 people in the ballroom of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. And they were media, advertisers, and a whole bunch of sports writers. It was a big crowd. And on the dais, at one end was Brent Musburger, and the other end was Pete Rozelle. And in between were 3 Super Bowl winning coaches who were working for CBS Sports at the time: George Allen, Hank Stram, and John Madden. And so they throw it open to the crowd for questions. And somebody asks, would any of you ever go back to coaching if you had a good offer? And at first, George Allen hems and haws and doesn't really answer the question. And Stram, sitting in his seat, also says, well, Stram was the number 2 team working with Vince Scully at the time. And he said how happy he was at CBS, and he didn't think he'd ever consider going back. Too much stress. And then it was Madden's turn. Well, Madden gets up from his seat, walks behind all the chairs on the dais, all the way down to the other end where Pete Rozelle is, stands behind Rozelle, puts his hand on Rozelle's shoulder and squeezes and says, people ask me all the time what I think about NFL officiating. And he has this big smirk on his face. Well, Rozelle starts to crack up. The whole 500 people in the audience start to crack up. And at that point, Madden goes into a 5-minute routine of what it's like to be a coach when it's 4th and inches and you send your best back into the line and you think you made it, but you're not sure. And all of a sudden, some official from 50 yards away comes running in with his hand up to mark the ball. And Madden says if he puts his left foot down, you made it. And if he puts his right foot down, you miss. And in this case, he put his right foot down. And that's exactly what happened to me and the Raiders our last year. We just got too many right foots when it counted. Otherwise, we would have been back in the Super Bowl. And the whole place explodes in laughter. Obviously, he was a lot funnier than I am at telling that story. But it occurs to the CBS executives who wanted to not renew his contract that maybe we've got something here. And they meet in the lobby and they decide they've not only got to renew him, they were going to have a 2.5-hour Super Bowl pregame show in 2 days. And Madden's not being part of it. So they had to get him on that pregame show. And what that concluded was they no longer saw him as just another former coach wanting to be an analyst. They now saw him for what he could be.
Yeah, and once that happened, I think that was kind of like the genie coming out of the bottle there, right? That kind of a moment. And so, as they decide, that they have something there, so they end up breaking up Summerall and Brookshire because of the drinking, and it becomes a decision to where John Madden's becoming in consideration, and he's now basically in a competition with Vin Scully, Pat Summerall is, for them being the number one broadcast team.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was huge news in 1981 for all of us who were at CBS and all the guys who were writing sports TV columns. The new president was a guy named Van Gordon Sauter. And he had decided to bring in Terry O'Neill, a former great producer a young producer from ABC Sports, who had been the producer of Monday Night Football. And he got in a riff with Cosell. And instead of agreeing to be reassigned, he resigned from ABC Sports. And Sauter hired him to revamp the entire NFL product for CBS Sports and bring it back into the 1980s and 90s. And O'Neill was a genius when it came to that. He was a football expert. He was a great producer, and he was a great writer. So O'Neill and Sauter talked about Madden being the number one analyst, and Madden had only worked the first year with those 4 games. And the second year with Gary Bender, he had improved working with Gary Bender, but he still wasn't the guy that we were going to know. At one point near the end of the season, Bender said he realized that Madden had really gotten it and that he was going to be great. But a lot of people at CBS weren't that sure at that point, but Sauter was sure because they had started running the Miller Lite commercials that summer, where Madden came bursting through the wall saying tastes great, less filling, etc. And he was just so beloved for doing those commercials. He was the average guy talking to the average guy drinking beer, and he was enormously popular for doing those commercials. And so when O'Neill said, well, have you seen any of Madden's games? Because they weren't going back to New York. Van Sauter said, oh, no, I haven't. And he said, well, how do you know he's the guy? He said, I've seen the Miller Lite commercials, and he could identify with anyone. Everybody's going to like this guy. He's a raconteur. So O'Neill watched some of his last games and said, I could live with him. I think he'll work out. But Van Sauter was a big fan of Vin Scully. They were both from L.A. and they both had the same agent in L.A. And he wanted Scully to work with Madden. And O'Neill realized that Scully loves to talk all the time, and Madden loves to talk all the time, and it would never work. They needed somebody like Summerall who had brevity and could get him off the limb when he had to. And he talked Sauter into a contest. The first 4 weeks of the year, Scully would work with Madden doing games while Summerall was doing the U.S. Open for CBS Sports. And the next 4 weeks in October, Summerall would work with Madden. And then at the end of October, all the executives would get together and vote. And that's exactly what happened. And they all voted for Summerall over Scully, except Sauter. And Sauter said, well, if you want him, you could have him, but you're going to have to live with his alcoholism. Mm. And Terry O'Neill had strict rules, no drinking at all the day before, the day of the game, until after the game was over. And Summerall was just great all through it. And they were together 21 years. They were great together from the very beginning. It started to show immediately how great they were going to be together. But before they even got together, Summerall was really pissed that he had to go through this, because he had been the number one play-by-play guy before that with Brookshire, and now he's been asked to do this competition, and so he never had an agent, and he went out and got one, and his agent tells him to tell Terry O'Neill, the producer, that if he doesn't get this job, he's going to NBC. Mm. And O'Neill begged him, don't do anything until October 26th when we have the vote. I'm sure you'll win. You'll win the job. And he did win the job, and he stayed. He even threatened to run for Senate in the state of Florida on the Republican ticket. And those roots went long in the Summerall family. His daughter, Susie Wiles, is now chief of staff for our president.
Yeah. And of course, Pat, is from Lake City, Florida, of course. And, so he wins the competition. He and John Madden gel, and it was like the perfect mix, right? You had Summerall, very understated, but was an excellent play-by-play guy, and he was able to bridge those gaps, when Madden would go in and out, and really helped him blossom in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I have a chapter called, Why They Were Great. And the number one reason of all the people I interviewed, people like former CBS and Fox broadcaster Dick Stockton, they all said the number one reason they were great was Summerall's unselfishness, that he could have been said so much more and brought so much more to the broadcast if he wanted to, but he allowed Madden to have all the room he wanted. And because of that, they were just terrific together. They've been compared to the greatest teams of all time in entertainment as well. Mm-hmm. Summerall was like Bud Abbott to Lou Costello, mm-hmm. With Madden being Costello. Madden had this great ability to capture a player's mannerism, his essence, his slang, and bring it into the broadcast. And he also had this unique ability to coach both teams simultaneously at the same time, better than they were being coached on the field.
Well, I tell you, the interesting aspect of the story, of course, goes beyond CBS, of course, because CBS eventually loses the broadcast rights for the NFC to Fox. And of course, Fox at that time is known for what? Married with Children and The Simpsons. And that's
Yeah.
and that's pretty much it. And Fox is trying to make a big move because they were not part of the Big Four network club at the time. So, it's not a foregone conclusion, because CBS loses the contract. Well, there's going to be all this talent out there, but it's not a foregone conclusion that Fox is going to hire everybody either. So they did set their sights, though, immediately on Summerall and Madden because they knew that credibility was going to be what sold that them being part of the NFL.
Yeah, it was interesting because CBS was owned by a guy named Larry Tisch at the time. And Larry Tisch had let the president of CBS Sports, Neil Pilson, talk him into buying Major League Baseball. And they paid what everybody said was $100 million a year too much. So they lost a ton of money with the baseball contract. And when the came time for the football contract, Tisch said, I'm not losing any money on football. And they were paying $250 million a year in the last year of their contract. Excuse me. I'm really sorry.
It's all right.
Neil Pilson thought they could get the contract for $290 million a year for the next 4 years. But he didn't realize that Rupert Murdoch at Fox was willing to way overbid for it because he was trying to build a network. He wasn't worried about losing money. He didn't care about that. He knew if he could get the NFL, he'd be able to build a network. He'd get a bunch of CBS affiliates and other stations around the country. So sorry. And he bid over $400 million a year, and CBS was flabbergasted. Tisch refused to match. They could have matched it and kept the contract. CBS had owned the contract since the first day the NFL was on the air, and never given it up. And now they were in a position they could match go $1 higher than any other bidder, and Larry Tisch refused. Well, the irony of it is 4 years later, when they realized what it cost them and their affiliates were leaving, and their ratings were lower because no NFL leading into it on Sundays and 60 Minutes, ratings were lower. 4 years later, they bid for and got the AFC package, and they paid more than $400 million for the AFC package 4 years later, and they're stuck without the NFC package.
Yeah. So as things progress through the 1990s, I also find it interesting. It probably did not hurt that the Dallas Cowboys became a dynasty in the 90s because Madden and Summerall were on all those games, which were classics. The Cowboys playing great teams like the 49ers and things like that. So that had to be a tremendous boost as the Cowboy dynasty had rolled in.
Yeah, obviously Jerry Jones just loved Madden and Summerall coming to the games. It came to the point that they did so many Cowboys games that Troy Aikman said, he did, those guys basically did the voiceover of my entire career.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Jones, when Pat passed away, said that Pat Summerall was royalty in the broadcast booth. The thing about CBS games and Fox games in those days was at 1 o'clock when they came on the air, they always started with a 30-second tease of what the game was going to be, kind of a promo, and Summerall would voice over the tease. And when you heard Pat Summerall's voice, you knew it was going to be a big game. He was, as Madden said at his funeral, there were voices before Pat Summerall, and there will be voices after him. But Pat Summerall, his was the voice of the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, you know, they were such a great tandem. And then John Madden would actually go on to work with Al Michaels, both at ABC and NBC. So John Madden was the number one analyst for all four of the major networks. We're never ever going to see that again.
No, we aren't. We'll never see that again. And Madden won 16 Emmy Awards during his career, and Summerall didn't win a single one. And it got to the point a few years in at CBS, when they were still at CBS, Madden was in California when they had the Emmy Awards. And when he found out he won, he said, "Oh, just give it to me in August when we all get together for our August NFL briefings before the season starts." So they presented Madden with the head of CBS Sports, presented Madden with the Emmy Award, and he came in from the back of the room and grabbed it, and instead walked over and handed it to Pat Summerall. Said, "This is the guy who deserves it." And that's the kind of partnership they had.
Yeah.
Sorry,
that's quite all right.
Me, Jeff.
Yeah, no worries. So before I wrap this up, I did want to ask you. Of course, you wrote the book about the NFL today. Brent Musburger goes into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, way overdue. But coming up in the middle of September, the 50th anniversary of the NFL today, he's going to make an appearance on that. Kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, as Brent definitely deserves all the flowers for his broadcast career.
First of all, why was it way overdue? Why had 9 different people from CBS Sports been inducted before Brent? He was the guy who helped make the NFL infinitely more popular with his great performance on the NFL today. He was the first one. There was no show like it before it. And everybody tried to copy it after it. Brent was fantastic. He also was a bad guy in lots of ways.
Yeah.
He backstabbed a lot of people. He stole their story ideas by listening in on their rehearsals. Summerall and Brookshire literally wanted to kill him. They had to stop Brookshire from going up to him with a gun at one point. He stole Jimmy the Greek's biggest story on the NFL today, when the Greek had the news that Notre Dame was going to hire a high school football coach named Jerry Faust. Brent just had this unique ability to want to be the guy and not let anybody else get the credit. And that could have been part of the reason he was so disliked, that it took them all those years to finally give him the Pete Rozelle Award and put him in the broadcasting wing of the Hall of Fame. Yes, it was long deserved for his work on the air, but you got to ask yourself why. Now, as far as him coming back to CBS will do anything to try to glamorize their product, because they're in a real competition these days. Mm-hmm. It's not just the NFL today. And having Brent on is a nice little thing. He still is with it, and he'll probably be fun.
Yeah. I definitely looking forward to that. And of course, again, that's a great book for folks who want to go back and read that one. Of course, your latest, Madden Summerall, how they revolutionized NFL broadcasting. For a guy like me, I've always been interested in the media since I was a little kid. So I really enjoy the fact that you bring a lot of the story behind the story here, which is highly entertaining. Having done these 2 books, what gratification has that brought you?
I really enjoyed it because number one, I've gotten to talk to a lot of my old colleagues. You know, writing this book in particular, I thought I was just going to be telling a lot of fun inside stories about these two guys, but talking to all the kids who worked with him in those days, like Richie Zients and Mike Arnold, right out of college. Mike Arnold has now directed 7 Super Bowls for CBS Sports. Richie Zients has produced 6 Super Bowls for Fox. They started in 1981 when Terry O'Neill hired Broadcast Associates. A great move for all those guys. Well, talking to all those guys who worked with them, the love and respect really came through. How much they loved each other and stayed close to Madden and Summerall all through the years. In fact, Zients was introduced to his wife by John Madden, and they were married at John Madden's home. And Zients was one of the last guys to be with John Madden before he passed away, over 40 years later.
Yeah.
So it was a very warm story to tell.
Yeah, outstanding stuff, and we definitely you can pre-order it on Amazon now. It's coming up at
Right.
mid-September, correct?
Yeah, September 16th. Pre-order it now, and you'll get it in 2 weeks.
That's outstanding. Rich Podolsky, thank you so much for being back on the show. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Take care.